Hello everybody, welcome to the United Stands. I'm Mark Goldbridge. This is your latest Manchester United transfer news. Who are Ruben Amorim's hot transfer priorities right now? Well, it's more of a star than me, let's be honest. Smash a like on the video. The Hotometer is back and it is updated by popular demand. So this is how we are looking at the moment in relation to the top 7 targets the United have at the moment. Now, I think there's a glaring error in there, and it's not been made by Matt, the admin, or me. It's in relation to Manchester United's transfer strategy, because I was going to do a video about a big issue that I think there is with Amorim's plan so far, from what we've seen so far, and that could change before the start of the season. But I changed it to hot topic because I thought, you know what, this community is brilliant and they deserve the Hotometer to be back, even though it's a Saturday. So look, we'll go through that first of all, but there is a big issue I want to talk about as well. So in a sense, it's 2 videos in one. And I suppose I will give you the answer and then give you the explanation afterwards. The answer is the midfield. The explanation is to come. Rickard says it's quite inaccurate. Well, our kid, if you want to give us Ruben Amorim's actual list, and I did speak to him about 20 minutes ago, and he said, I'm sorry, Mark, as much as I love the United Stand, I can't actually give you my top 7 because then I'd be telling the whole world what I want. So it might be inaccurate, but it's based on lots of your comments, lots of our chat, and where we think we're at the moment. And that's sort of the concept of the Hotometer for the last few years, our kid. And if you don't like it, go forth and prosper. Anyway, let's get on with the show with the good vibes. So I think at the moment, it's very obvious that Mbeumo would be 90%, 9 out of 10, absolutely nailed on. Here we go, anytime soon. You then drop, actually, and this is normal. This can happen. You know, you're all in on one transfer, and then behind that, you sort of like, you don't know what's coming next. Mbeumo will happen, and Prowler says it's taken a bit long. It'll happen. Chill your boots. It'll be fine. Gyökeres, I've put as a 6 out of 10. Now, I did say yesterday 50-50, but this morning, looking at the betting odds, looking at what Fabrizio said, looking at the absence of a competitor, I would say 60%, 6 out of 10 on Gyökeres puts him as the second most likely signing that we're going to make at this moment in time. Obviously, I've thrown Mateta in there as 4 because it's sort of like if we don't get Gyökeres, we have to get a striker, and that's when I think Mateta would move up to 7 or 8. So at the moment, I'd drop Mateta in at a 4 out of 10 or a 40% chance, and I'd keep Gyökeres at 60%. I may be being a little bit reserved here. I may be being a little bit naive, low IQ, whatever you want to call it, but I have thought this through. The Hotometer is important. It's unique to this community, and I think it gives us a visual representation of all the bullshit, all the reality, based on our experience. And that's always been the concept of the Hotometer. We get so much thrown at us from Fabrizio, from Ben, from The Athletic, from the Manchester Evening News. We get so much thrown at us, and the concept of the Hotometer was to take all that information and impart our experience on it, on what we think is likely and isn't. So I think at the moment, I think putting Gyökeres at 60% is probably about right. I would love to rocket that up to 70, 80%. I don't want to see it dropping down. But yeah, I was 50-50 on this yesterday, but I think in light of what Romano has said, I'd probably knock that up to a 6 out of 10. And keep Mateta at 4 as an outlier at the moment. And then this is where my big issue comes, really. And this is the video I was going to do, which is sort of, wrapped up in this. Ederson is the only midfielder on that list. There is a Coldometer. If you want a Coldometer, we can do that tomorrow at 2. Smash a like on the video. If it hits 10,000 likes, the Coldometer will come. So I forgot about that. We can do the Coldometer. We'll keep our Matt busy over the weekend. But Ederson at the moment is probably 30%. He's the only midfielder on the list. This, to me, is... And maybe we can't be greedy, but where do you see United's biggest issue beyond goalkeeper, striker, and number 10? Because for me, it's the midfield, but I also think it's a very big issue in the sense that I look at the Newcastles, I look at the Aston Villas, I look at the Liverpools, I look at the Arsenals, Rodri back at Man City. These are good midfields. They're very good midfields. And from playing football from the age of 4 to being the age I am now, I've always heard that line, games are won and lost in the midfield. And it's true. It's the core of the earth. No, that's something else. It's the middle of the team. You know, you think about people like Roy Keane, Paul Scholes, Michael Carrick, these types of players over the years, they're Brian Robson, they're just the fulcrum of the team. And we have to make sure that we don't ignore that area of the pitch, because it's really important. It's important in an Amorim system. It's important in a Ten Hag system. So I do hope that what we're going to get in the midfield is that we just can't impart any prediction or likelihood. And just because, and let me just say, in relation to the Hotometer, when we did this last year, Agate didn't feature until we were in advanced talks. De Ligt didn't feature until we were in talks. They came from nowhere. So just because Ederson's the only midfielder there, I would say Ederson represents midfield. Doesn't mean we're going to get Ederson. He could sign for Al-Hilal this week. Apparently that's what they're looking to do. But he represents midfield, and we could always go from today with no idea to tomorrow with a 9 out of 10 midfielder. And I'm hoping that's what's going to happen, because I do think it's a key area. I don't mind not buying a centre-back this summer. I can just about get by with not buying a wing-back. But I think a midfielder has to happen, really, if I'm being completely honest. I've just seen a chat here. Pan says that Liverpool are second now on Bet365. Yeah, that's going to hurt. Just going back up the Hotometer again, that will hurt. If Gyökeres goes to Liverpool, that would really hurt. Definitely. But look, you've got to be in the race, haven't you? And ultimately, what I will say about that before I move on is that if Gyökeres goes to Chelsea or Arsenal, or dare I say it, Liverpool, this is where this ignorance around what happened last season will come back and bite us on the arse. There's positivity at the moment because we're not playing games and losing, and we're looking forward to next season, and we're making decent moves. The minute you lose someone like Gyökeres to Liverpool, you would get it right in the nuts that this is because of last season, because we didn't get Champions League football. But we'll deal with that when it happens. Bruno will need to be massively disciplined playing in the midfield unless we buy a Kante-type midfielder. I don't think, Stu Cantona, in my opinion, Bruno and discipline actually works. Can we have a C meter for outgoing, says Nicholas McCrory. It's called the colder meter, but we can bring that back, yes. Palmer O-meter, I can see, says Rub. Can we write a note to Amorim and ask him to make Martinez a 10 because Onana is woeful, says Constantine. And I would love to have Cavani back over Gyökeres, says Nicholas. Is he still playing? And with all the possible exits, are you doing the colder meter as well? Yes, Glenn. Jaden, welcome to Members Club. And Bjorn, thank you very much for the super chat. So Ederson represents the midfield. I've then got two goalkeepers. I've got Milinkovic-Savic of Torino and Emi Martinez of Aston Villa at 3. Which again, I think sort of represents the goalkeeper at the moment. 30% chance of getting a goalkeeper, and those two would probably be the most likely to at the moment. Again, as I said on the morning show, I feel the goalkeeper will be somebody we're not talking about at the moment. I feel from what I'm hearing that there is, a real desire, wrong word, a real understanding in the club, and I'm talking beyond the manager, Wilcox, that we need a goalkeeper. I think it's something that Wilcox would understand from his time at Manchester City, but it's something that somebody in football would understand from modern football. It's very, very unusual for a modern manager not to bring in their own goalkeeper, and Wilcox will be on board with that. So I think that United will prioritise the best goalkeeper they can go and get. I just don't know who that's going to be at the moment. Now, it could be Emi Martinez. He's a good goalkeeper, but it just doesn't feel like he doesn't feel like he's the right fit for Man United. There's just something about Emi Martinez that doesn't feel right. Maybe it's the 3-game ban at the start of the season, but that's minuscule, really. I don't feel like that's going to happen. Milinkovic-Savic, Torino does feel like a good buy, but does he feel like he's an Amorim buy? I think the goalkeeper we're going to get will be the Amorim goalkeeper, and obviously a lot of this depends on Onana. And then in the final top 7 on the Hotometer at the moment, and I've got to say, I wanted to put somebody else there, but we were sort of discussing this, and we said, look, you know what? We should put Esteban in there because Ben Jacobs has mentioned this twice now, and he is a wing-back, and United are apparently still interested in a wing back if the opportunity comes up. So we sort of threw him in there. You could throw other people in there, but I do think that, you know, it's worth keeping in there at the moment and seeing what develops with that. So, look, that's what we've got at the moment in relation to the Hotometer backed by demand. And how many of those players do I think we'll actually get? One. Like one is who I think we'll get is Mbeumo. Douglas Luiz as Devin, I'd like to be adding him in as a midfielder. But I actually don't think we will get any of those players other than Mbeumo at the moment. I don't think we'll get Gyökeres. I'm following the story with excitement and I want it to happen, but you're not going to catch me going, we're getting Gyökeres, because I ain't getting involved in jinxing this one. I think it's too important. I think a player of his suitability, you know, the drop off from Gyökeres to next is too big. So I don't think we'll get him, but I hope that we do. I don't think we're going to get Ederson anymore. I've heard nothing about Ederson ever since we got knocked out of the Champions League. Mateta, I mean, like, we could pivot to that, I suppose. Goalkeepers, I feel it will be somebody else. And Esteban, I mean, look, fair play to Ben Jacobs if he gets that. But I repeat what I said before. I think that the midfield needs to be a focus, because I look at the Premier League next season, and next week we will get those Premier League fixtures. In fact, I need to just tell you what date that is. But I look at the Premier League next season, and I look at the just intensity and quality of so many teams better than us last season, and it does sort of make me think, you know, we need to focus in on that area. So June the 18th at 9 AM is when they announce the Premier League fixtures, which is actually not next week, it's the week after. So when's June the 18th? 8th, 9th. Oh, I never can do this. June the 17th will be June the 18th, 14th, 15th, 16th. So next week on Wednesday, isn't it? A week on Wednesday. So we'll get that then. Less than 2 weeks, though. Any retired United players you wish you can have now, Mark, says Siabs? Not really. I don't really spend time thinking about stuff like that, because I live in a reality, not in a bringing back retired players for now. But if I could bring one back, it would be Roy Keane. Apparently, it might be only a one-match ban due to the type of offence. Not sure if it's been confirmed, says Glenn C. And Vic says, yo, Mark, it's refreshing to see our top three targets, Cunha, Mbeumo and Gyökeres, being good athletes. We need the same for the midfield, pace and smart. Well, we said this, Vix, about Amorim before. I think it's one of the big factors as to why Bruno Fernandes has been moved back into the midfield. Amorim really does like pace in that front three, and Mbeumo is quick, as you know. Cunha, I don't know. I don't know whether I'd view Cunha as quick. I mean, he's mobile, but I don't know whether he's quick. Gyökeres is. Alexander, welcome to the Members Club. Thank you very much. I'd go for Emi Martinez, says MUFC. Sell Onana and Bienda and bring in Martinez and Milinkovic-Savic, says Liam Vernon. I mean, that would be nice, wouldn't it? That would be nice. That would be very nice. Tom McBride says, I'm glad the Osman deal is dead. It would have ended badly if he'd signed for us. He has an attitude problem, and Christ knows we've had enough of that. Very strong words from Tom McBride. Probably get a little bit of kickback in the chat. What did I say? If we got Osman, I'd go and find a hoodie, which apparently is sold out, that Amorim used to wear. Yeah, I do like Osman. I have always liked him, but it feels like it wasn't going to be a good fit for Manchester United. I would agree with that. Yeah, definitely. But you know what? You can have Mbeumo, you can have Cunha, and you can have Gyökeres. But if you haven't got a midfield that can win the ball, you're going to get beat. And that's something that we've got to figure out. I mean, I was thinking about this afternoon, actually. In relation to Mainu, does anybody think we could play Bruno and Mainu together as the midfield too? Because that would solve a lot of problems. That would, I mean, we know Bruno's going to play in the midfield. I'd have sold Bruno. Boring story, you know I would. I'd have sold him because I don't think he suits the system, and I think he's too much of a free roller, and £100 million is a lot of money. But we didn't. So Bruno will take one of the midfield positions. Could you play Bruno and Mainu together? And the honest answer is, I think it would get hurt physically against Liverpool, against Newcastle, and teams like that. I think at home, when you're at home and you're playing, I don't want to be disrespectful here, Sunderland, you can do that. You can play Eriksen and Bruno against those types of teams. And we saw against Aston Villa, it can work. It wasn't Bruno and Mainu, but it was Bruno and Casemiro. And it was surprising how that worked because Aston Villa sat back and countered to their stupidity. But when you're going away and when you're playing against decent teams who want to impose their style of football on you and it gets physical in the midfield, I don't think Mainu and Bruno would work. I don't even know if Ugarte and Bruno will work because it's difficult. I think the midfield is an area for me that I'm starting to think more and more is a problem. I'll be honest. I still sit here today in 2025 saying, if you're asking me, I'm going to run a poll on this actually. I think this is just a very sort of thing we do. And then I'll tell you what I was going to say. So what was I going to say? Bruno, Ugarte. Jaden's just gifted a membership. You're a legend, Jaden. Thank you very much for that. So Bruno and Ugarte midfield or Mainu and Ugarte midfield. Which one would you prefer? This was the midfield I thought we were going to get when we brought Ugarte a year ago with Ten Hag. And he hardly used it. I don't even know if Ten Hag did use it, but it hardly got played. I don't think they played that many games last season. Bruno and Ugarte is a better combination of players, but I'd still sit here and say I think Mainu and Ugarte works better as a balance. I might be an idiot for saying that because people would be saying Bruno's better than Mainu, but I think Mainu's a better 8. I do. Not based on last season, but based on the season before. I think Mainu's a better 8 than Bruno because he understands the discipline required to play the role. I don't think he had a great season last year for a multitude of reasons, but I still do think that I would rather have Mainu and Ugarte than Bruno and Ugarte. But I don't think you can have Bruno and Mainu. I think you've got to have an Ugarte type next to him. Do you think he'll sell Ugarte eventually? I think he has to be allowed to sell players that whoever he wants. I mean, if he wants to sell Onana, he can sell Ugarte. They were both bought by Ten Hag. But the thing about Ugarte is that he was very much an Ineos signing. Somebody signed that off. I presume Jason Wilcox. So what I'm hearing about Ugarte is that Amorim likes him, but feels like there is a lack of understanding to the system, which is a bit strange considering he had him before. But I think I agree with Lee Berman. I think Ugarte could have a really impactful second season because it wasn't a dreadful first season. We need the new players. Bruno can focus on his role, says OTG. Thank you very much for that. We need to be obsessed with PSG model, not Chelsea, says Who to Blame. And I'm glad that I've done that from Tom McBride as well. So that is your Hotometer. It is back, and I've sort of combined 2 videos in one here because the running theme has been the midfield. Now, I'm not sitting here moaning about the midfield saying buy a midfielder. But what I am saying is that by the start of the season, I'd be very disappointed if we haven't brought a midfielder in because I'm just not feeling the roster at the moment. Collier, Mainu, Ugarte, Casemiro, Bruno just doesn't jump out to me of having a midfield 2. 5 players is actually enough, by the way. I don't need 6. 5 players is enough for 2 positions in a season where you're not going to play European football. We've got the numbers. I just don't like the combinations. I really, really don't. There's no combination there that makes me go, I like it. Ugarte, Casemiro, 2 defensive. Bruno, Casemiro, Bruno, Ugarte, not defensive enough. Collier is, we haven't really seen enough of him. Mainu, Casemiro, Mainu, Ugarte might be the best balanced one. So I just think I would take one of those players out and bring a really good midfielder in. And to be honest with you, Ugarte's not going to go. I don't think Mainu's going to go. Bruno's not going to go. So it would have to be Casemiro or Collier, wouldn't it? When I first heard of the Hotometer, I thought it was rating their looks. Any chance of one of those, says Double? We get cancelled. It's clear we are targeted players at mid-table Premier League clubs. Do you see us getting another player with that profile that we're not linked to, says KMD? I think you're saying that because we've got Brentford's Mbermo and Wolves' Cunha. I think they're clever signings, but I don't think we looked at top performing players in the Premier League and then looked at what clubs they were at. And Mbeumo and Cunha are definitely in the top 10, arguably top 5 players in the Premier League this season. So we've done very well to go and get those 2 players. I don't think there's another player really that we're going to be looking at in the Premier League like that. Gyökeres is obviously, maybe Mateta at Crystal Palace to be fair, but I think the opportunity for Mbeumo and Cunha was really intelligent because we need players in those positions and they're ready to take the next step and they're both experienced. They're perfect for what we need. As I said before, I think Cunha could have gone to Arsenal and Mbeumo could have gone to Newcastle or vice versa, and they both would have done well. So I'm very happy with those signings. But I don't think we'll go for another player like that. I think they were opportunist and did well. Casemiro does need to go, but again, he'll be a mercenary and not go, says John. Look, we struggled to sell players. This time last year, we wanted Eriksen and Lindelof to go. They run their contracts down. You can get really harsh on this sort of stuff, or you can get very defensive about it. The reality is, we cheer and champion these players, but ultimately, they don't have the best interests of you or the club at heart. They have the best interests of themselves. And that's not necessarily a bad thing when the club's run by the Glazers. But these players hanging around are doing it for the benefit of themselves. And they've got every right to do that. They have short careers. But the reality is United have been trying to move Casemiro on for a year. I don't think he's going to go. I really, really don't. So midfield might end up being neglected because we can't afford to bring in another midfielder and have a midfield roster of 6. But we've got to do something with that midfield. I don't see... Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe Agate and Bruno will cook it next season. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Any chance of Neves after the Club World Cup, says Naveen? I don't think so. I think he's quite happy out there, isn't he? From what I saw, the interview was trying to get Bruno. Can you explain the hotometer, says Theo? So, yes, if you don't understand what the hotometer is, it's a very famous part of the United Stand community over the years. And basically, it's the top 7 transfers as we predict at the moment. It's done out of 10. So 9 out of 10 means it's very hot. Basically, 90% chance. At the bottom is Esteban on 2, which is 2 out of 10 chance of happening, and 20%. It's very simple. There we go. It'll be a miracle if we get away with keeping Bruno. What's the plan if he fails in the pivot? I back Amorim, but this is a huge risk, says Jace. There'll always be the opportunity to sell Bruno in a year's time, but I think we have committed to Bruno for the next... Look, I don't want to get dragged into it because it just ends up being a conversation that... Well, I don't mind being dragged into it. I haven't changed my mind. I actually haven't changed my mind. I like Bruno. I was obsessed with us buying Bruno, and I've always liked Bruno, but I don't do player FC. I don't do agenda. I do the truth. And he has pissed me off a lot over the last 2 years, performance-wise. I think there's been a lot of bad performances and there's been a lot of good performances. I thought he was absolutely shocking in the final. And that's just been swept under the carpet. He was absolute dog shit in that final, as was everybody else. So, yeah, he was our player of the year. We would have been relegated without him. I agree with all those things. But if you're asking me if I'd have took the 100 million, I'd have took it. And I'd still take it. And I don't think that's ever going to change. But the difference with me is that there are people out there that just don't like Bruno, don't rate Bruno. Ricky doesn't rate Bruno, does he? And that's, you know, he's probably going to be a little bit more pissed off about it than I am. I'm sort of like, the manager wanted to keep him. I like Bruno. Let's hope it works. But 100% I'd have took the money. 100%. I think we'd be a better team with a team that's balanced rather than having one player that sort of, you know, rules the roost. And I think Bruno plays within discipline. I think he tries to do too much. So I think, you know, having a team is more important than having a team that's focused around one individual. But having said that, Bruno's probably never played in a team that's got the likes of Cunha, Gyökeres and Mbeumo in it. And I know we're not there yet, but you could argue that Cunha's better than Bruno in a year's time. You could argue that Mbeumo's better than Bruno in a year's time. You could argue that Gyökeres is our best player in a year's time. And I think that's what we need. And maybe as Bruno plays into his 30s, he will become a more disciplined player. And a disciplined Bruno would be better than a free roll Bruno. So maybe that's what we're about to get from Bruno. We just haven't seen it yet. I understand the criticism and I understand the praise. If we get the discipline one, then you know, and also has better players around him where he doesn't feel he has to be running everywhere. But I still think we need a midfielder, definitely. Yeah, and Jackson's right. We need to move on. Bruno is staying. There is no point in keep going on about it because he is staying. And, you know, it's not going to do any of us any good to keep talking about it. But I still think the midfield is a big issue and we need to look at it. Thomas Frank to Spurs really need to move soon, says Matthew. Oh, just on that very quickly, I forgot to mention it on the morning show. A few people were talking about Thomas Frank going to Spurs potentially being a negative for the Mbeumo deal. I actually see it as a positive. I see it as a real positive. I think if Thomas Frank was staying at Brentford and Mbeumo's his player, that makes it, you know, probably a little bit more difficult for us. I think with Thomas Frank going, for Mbeumo, it's like, well, the manager's going. Just let's get on with it. And as for Thomas Frank goes to Spurs and signs Mbeumo, no. He's chosen us over Newcastle and other clubs. He ain't going to bloody choose Spurs, is he? Come on. It's Spurs. I know they beat us in the final and fair play, but he ain't going to choose Spurs over Man United when he's choose Man United over Newcastle and other clubs, is he? So I think it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Thanks everyone for watching. I'm back with you at 8 o'clock. Remember to smash a like on the video. I'm going to change it to 5,000 likes for the Colder Meter because 1,500 likes when we've got 14,000 watching. It wasn't looking good, bro, for the Colder Meter. So we'll change it to 5. Thanks everyone for watching. Garnacho sale to buy Goretzka or Belieber. This is TV shows. I think Garnacho's money's probably going to more likely go towards Gyökeres at the end of the day, mate. But I'm a believer in Belieber. I do like him. Speak to you all in a bit. Take care. Thanks for watching.